My name is Robin Green, and I was born in Searcy, Arkansas in 1968. My dad was Leroy Froman, and my mom, Nancy Froman. I was blessed to have wonderful parents. My dad was it was then called municipal judge. Now they call it district judge in Searcy. He was an attorney before becoming judge. My mom had her master's in dietetics, and she was the dietitian at the local hospital in Searcy. I have one sister, Elizabeth Froman, and she's a pediatrician. I grew up in Searcy, and it was a great town to grow up in, Searcy, Arkansas. My graduating class at Searcy High School, I think, had less than 200 people. Everybody knew everybody. It was a great, safe town, very church-oriented. I was blessed to have a great childhood. I was really active in Searcy. I did ballet for, I believe, approximately 10 years. I played on the tennis team. I was active in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, FBLA, the Thespian Club. I participated in the plays. I was very active in the church as well. So stayed very busy. I did spend time in my dad's law office. When I was in high school, I actually was approached by some attorneys. There's a law firm in Searcy called Lytle, Beebe, Rainey & Bell, and they needed someone to answer the phone at their office on Saturdays. And so I was happy to be asked and accepted the position. And so I worked at their office on Saturdays, and then it turned into an after-school position as well, sometimes too, answering the phone and making copies, etc. So yes, so Lytle, Beebe, Rainey & Bell, the Beebe of the firm was Mike Beebe, and he at the time was a state senator for Arkansas. He also had his private practice as part of this firm. And so I had a great deal of respect for him. He had a tremendous amount of energy, worked very hard, serving in both the Arkansas legislature and in his as an attorney.
So what were some of the things that you learned in high school working at that firm?
Well, just being a fly on the wall, I guess, watching the interactions, watching how the attorneys prepared for their cases. I can't say I contributed very much, but just by watching and learning, I guess.
So when did you know you wanted to be a lawyer? I knew I wanted to be when?
That's a great question. I think over the years, hearing about the cases and watching my dad, and then having the experience working as a Girl Friday, so to speak, at Lytle, Beebe, Rainey & Bell, I knew I was interested in the law and hoped to get accepted in law school. Didn't know how that would work, but everything panned out. So I graduated high school in 1986, and I went to Hendrix College in Conway. And there, I graduated after 3.5 years with a degree in economics and business with an emphasis in accounting. So I graduated Hendrix, and then I was accepted and entered into the University of Arkansas School of Law in Fayetteville. Graduated 3 years later and passed the bar exam immediately thereafter. And then my first job was here in Benton County as a deputy prosecuting attorney.
So talk about, what was that like when you got here in the early
1993.
90s? What was it? What was Benton County like?
There was hardly any traffic, which is so night and day now, of course. It was a very small town environment. There was a separation between Centerton and Bentonville and Rogers. Now you can't really tell the boundaries as you're driving. The bypass did not have hardly any traffic at all. It was night and day from where we are now, of course.
What about the caseload? What was it like coming in as a deputy? Just tell me in your own words, what was that like?
So when I began as a deputy prosecuting attorney, David Klinger was the elected prosecuting attorney, and he was really big on preparation, and instilled in each of us as deputy prosecutors the importance of being completely prepared for trial, have all of your cases prepared and properly worked up. My initial assignment was handling misdemeanors, and we had a backload of cases that needed to go to trial, actually DWI and other misdemeanors, speedy trial was about to run. And so I found myself having 2 and 3 jury trials a week. I'd never even seen a jury trial in person, but I found myself suddenly handling jury trials and getting a lot of jury trial experience. And so I moved up quickly from the misdemeanors to the felony division, and ultimately I became chief of the felony division of the Benton County Prosecutor's Office. Well, David Klinger would believe in being firm but fair, which is an attitude I also share in. But he wanted to make certain that justice was served, and I just had a tremendous amount of respect for him. As I was in the prosecutor's office under him, we would have regular staff meetings. He wanted updates. He wanted to know where, the status of each of the cases, and making certain that everything was properly prepared. He, at the time, was also beginning his run for circuit judge. And so he ended up being elected circuit judge, and then Brad Butler was elected to succeed him. So I was happy actually being a deputy prosecuting attorney, and I loved being chief of the felony division. I was in charge of assigning the cases to the deputy prosecutors, making certain they were properly prepared for trial. And I did this when Brad Butler was the prosecuting attorney. There ended up being some disagreements, I'll say. And I left the Benton County Prosecuting Attorney's Office as chief of the felony division. I left that position in 1997, and the man that had been the county civil attorney, his name was Ed Garton, he had resigned. And so I became the county civil attorney in 1997, and in that position, I served as legal counsel to each of the elected officials of Benton County, and I defended Benton County in litigation, including multiple appearances at the Arkansas Supreme Court. I enjoyed that. Of course, I missed prosecuting, but it was a great experience. In 2000, the man that had been prosecuting attorney during this time, Brad Butler, resigned. And Governor Huckabee called and asked if I would accept appointment to become the Benton County Prosecuting Attorney and succeed Brad Butler. Well, there were a number of active homicide cases at the time that I was appointed, and I was the first woman prosecuting attorney for this county. We had an ongoing, just a plethora of homicide cases at that time, which is really unusual for Benton County, but it happened. And so we were just hands-on, burning the midnight oil, prepping these cases. We had, I believe there was if I recall properly, there was a stabbing in Siloam Springs. There were multiple ongoing homicides occurring. There was a baby that had been had its throat slit and left in a burning trailer. There were several big, high-profile cases occurring, and we had a relatively small office at the time. And so it was not uncommon at all to get to work at 7 a.m. and leave at 10:30 p.m. at night. That was not uncommon at all. So, but again, it was the prepare. One thing that David Klinger had instilled in me is that the prosecutor's office begins working with law enforcement at the time the crime occurs. And this is to preserve the key evidence. And so to work with law enforcement and recognize we need a search warrant here. And let's make certain that the search warrant is done properly so that it will withstand legal scrutiny and ultimately in court and through suppression hearings, et cetera. And so that's one thing that Benton County Prosecuting Attorney's Office has historically done. Law enforcement calls the deputy prosecutor on call. The bigger the crime, the higher up the food chain, so to speak, in the prosecutor's office, the case goes and the phone calls go. But if there's a homicide, the prosecuting attorney is called and they respond on scene. And that was what we would do so that we could hands-on give legal advice to law enforcement at the time the crime occurs, make the bond recommendations at the time, and work, at the time the crime happens, start then, and then carry it all the way through trial. So as a deputy prosecutor, I'd handled aggravated robbery jury trials, child physical abuse jury trials, child sexual abuse jury trials. Those cases are the worst, of course, and the hardest because they affect your heart. It's hard. You need to be objective and professional, but you're trying to seek justice for a little child, who's been wronged and hurt. As prosecuting attorney, so I was prosecuting attorney in 2000, and then again I was reappointed. Actually, in 2004, Governor Huckabee appointed me again, and I served again as the Benton County Prosecuting Attorney from 2004 to 2006. And so during that time, I convened a grand jury. We had a state trooper that it was a case of mistaken identity. He mistook a mentally handicapped, unarmed man on the side of the road on Highway 412 in Benton County, just outside of Salem Springs. He mistook him for an escapee and ended up shooting and killing this mentally handicapped, unarmed man. And I convened a grand jury. Chad Atwell was deputy prosecuting attorney, worked with me, and we had a grand jury, which Benton County had not had in I don't know how long, decades at least, to make the decision on whether or not the state trooper should be charged or should not be. And they came down with the negligent homicide charge on the case. I finished serving as prosecuting attorney in 2006, and I went back to my role as the county civil attorney. And at that time, I ran for circuit judge and was elected in 2008. When I was prosecuting attorney, I also had the longest capital murder trial, or longest jury trial, I should say, in the history of Benton County. It was aggravated. It was a kidnapping and capital murder case that occurred. Actually, the decedent's body was found in Oklahoma, but we were able to prosecute it successfully. The case here in Benton County. My predecessor, Bob Balfe, had been elected during the years when I was the county civil attorney. And so when Governor Huckabee asked me to step back in and become prosecuting attorney again in 2004, then prosecuting attorney Bob Balfe told me the case can't be won. They'd already lost a suppression hearing. It was a very complicated case. The body was found in Oklahoma. The man we believed had been kidnapped beginning in Bella Vista. After I was elected, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation came over and met with me and showed me the evidence. And it was over 400 pieces of evidence, but it was an entirely circumstantial evidence case. But once you saw all the evidence, there was no doubt who had committed this kidnapping and this murder. And the victim's name was David Howard. He had been a resident of Bella Vista, actually had run the marina there. And he had been duped and kidnapped by this Albert Key Smith as part of a love triangle case, and was murdered in cold blood in Oklahoma. So we were able to successfully prosecute him here in Benton County. Van Stone was a deputy prosecuting attorney and had a brilliant legal mind. He had done the research to realize that Benton County actually could exert jurisdiction here, and we relied on that research and successfully prosecuted the case here in Benton County and got the guilty verdict. And that's a case, the trial lasted over 6 weeks. We introduced the 400 pieces of evidence. It withstood appeal, and I was proud to get justice for that victim. So I was elected in 2008. During that time, I've had over half of the felony criminal cases in Benton County. That includes everything, death penalty cases. There's a lot of drug cases, child abuse cases. Those are, of course, extremely hard to hear. Residential burglary. It's the normal criminal caseload. I have some of the civil cases, but predominantly my focus is on the criminal cases of Benton County. When I was prosecuting attorney, if someone was arrested in Benton County with a felony offense, the law enforcement would immediately call the deputy prosecutor on call, and they would work together to decide whether the person should be released on their own recognizance or if there's a concern that they could be a flight risk or maybe go and hurt a victim again. And so depending on these factors, whether they could be released without having to post bail and just given given a court date to appear in circuit court, or alternatively, take them to jail, hold them, and we're going to have a bond hearing and hopefully, maybe get a no contact order if needed, maybe conditions of release. They can't possess firearms, ammunition, controlled substances, etc. So the prosecuting attorney or deputy prosecutor works with the law enforcement at the time of the arrest. Once they're taken to jail, they're given a court date in the Benton County Circuit Court to appear. The prosecutor's office then gathers the police reports to make a decision about what charge, if any, should be filed. Charges are then either filed or the state announces no charges based upon either a suppression issue or new evidence has come to light. But if the person is in custody, under our Constitution, you have the right to a speedy trial. And if the person is in custody, they have to be brought to trial within 9 months. If they're not in custody, then the state has a year. There are certain periods of time that can be excluded from the speedy trial calculation: motions to suppress, motions for a mental evaluation to determine if they can be held criminally responsible based upon mental abilities. And so there are pockets of time that can be excluded from that calculation. But the wheels of justice, it's designed so the wheels of justice are continuously turning, and to keep people from languishing in the county jail. They are presumed innocent, of course.
Aren't defendants facing trial typically offered some kind of a plea, or a lot of times negotiated? How does that work?
That's right. So with so many cases in the criminal justice system, there's just not the means available, both financially and judicially, from a perspective of judicial economy, to try every single person to a jury. And so specifically, like in the drug cases, those, once you get the crime lab results back, if they come back positive for fentanyl or cocaine or heroin, and if the case is strong, those cases are more likely to plead out. And the cases that are least likely to plead guilty are the child sex abuse cases. No one wants to admit that they have engaged in something, that nefarious. So those cases are the ones that are most likely to go to trial. But it's common in most cases for the prosecutor's office to extend a plea offer. And that way, that the person doesn't have the exposure that they would have if it were to go to a jury trial, what their potential sentence could be. And the prosecutor's office are trying to get a fair resolution. If they have a victim, they're hoping not to put the victim to have to testify in front of a jury. They're concerned about that. The expense of flying in expert witnesses, flying in witnesses, it can get extremely expensive. And so for many reasons, most cases are actually, to your point, are resolved by plea agreements.
So as both prosecutor and judge, who are some of the attorneys that stand out, maybe that for their presentation or the way they represent their clients?
Well, historically, John Everett is one that comes to mind. W.H. Taylor, of course. There, Drew Miller, Shane Wilkinson are some that are regularly trying cases, not afraid to try a case. And again, they came from the Benton County Prosecutor's Office to prepare, know your case, so very thoroughly. Those are some of the ones that initially stand out. I've tried to give back as well. I've served on the Arkansas State Crime Laboratory Board. I've been appointed to serve as a special justice on the Arkansas Supreme Court a couple of occasions. I've been active in church as well. I served on the Arkansas Supreme Court Criminal Rules Committee. I was appointed by the Arkansas Supreme Court to that committee. I served many years on that committee. It's been enlightening and a way to give back as well. I was blessed to get to meet Justice Antonin Scalia. My family and I got to go and meet him actually in his chambers, and he could not have been more receptive and welcoming. and really enjoyed. He had interesting stories, but he was also interested in learning about us. And I have very positive memories about Justice Scalia. Recently I went to Washington, D.C. for a conference and actually got to observe the United States Supreme Court in action with their oral arguments before them. And it was interesting to see their personalities and to see how they handled themselves. I was just so very proud of our judicial system and to see it in action like that. Got to meet Chief Justice Roberts, very kind, very professional gentleman, and just makes me proud to be a part of the judiciary. I'm certainly not at that level, but I have so much respect.
Thank you. If someone came to you and said, Judge, tell me about Benton County. What's it like? What would you tell them?
Well, I feel like we live in a bubble, and it's such a blessing here. But the best part of Benton County is the people, and I think that's one reason why this area has attracted so many other great people to it. The population has, of course, grown so much. But it's salt of the earth people. I believe the people truly care about each other. Southern hospitality, Southern manners, of course, here. But people really look out for each other, and there is a sense of caring and looking out for each other. So I think that's the best quality of our area.